I'm going to go ahead and get started. We are, we're going to call the meeting to order of the State Allocation Board at 4:08 p.m. And I apologize that we're a few minutes late. We are actually in 2023, but having a 2021 problem with our hybrid meetings. So apologies. If at any point during this meeting there is an issue with the Zoom interface and you would like to communicate with us, you may keep it with the Q&A, and Ryan will help us read so that everyone has full access to the meeting. So to the extent that you are having a difficult time hearing or we can't hear you at any time during the Zoom meeting, please let us know by typing into the Q&A as a participant. We will read your questions, so everything you type in there, everyone will be able to hear and see in order to allow for full access to this meeting in the event that our AV is not proving to be working. So thank you all for being here. Ms. Jones, will you call the roll to establish a quorum, please?
Yes, I will. Senator Wilk.
Present.
Senator Laird. Senator Newman. Assemblymember Bonta. Assemblymember Marisucci. Assemblymember Davies.
Here.
Juan Morales.
Here.
Jeremy Smith.
Here.
Ana Lasso.
Here.
Gail Miller.
Here. We have a quorum, and we will welcome the rest of our members as they arrive. We are currently in room 1101 at the Department of Education headquarters at 1430 N as in Nancy Street, if you'd like to provide public comment in person. We're also conducting the meeting by Zoom, and if you would like to participate in the Zoom teleconference, you can do that by raising your Zoom hand. And again, we will have the ability to participate that way in two ways. One, by raising your Zoom hand, and we will unmute you. And if that fails, we will allow you then to type your questions into the chat. We will read them out and then respond. And that is during public comment periods. If you are calling into the meeting and not here in person or using Zoom, unfortunately, you will not be able to provide public comment. There will not be a closed session at today's meeting. And we will begin with our first action item, which are the minutes from June 28th, 2023. Ms. Silverman, thank you.
Second.
Any public comment? We have a motion and a second. Any objection to unanimous roll call for the minutes? It's so exciting, we're in person. Seeing none, we will keep that open for the members that are coming. The next item on our agenda is the delegation of authority. Ms. Silverman?
Yes, we are pleased to announce tonight that we actually have announced a deputy executive officer that replaces Ms. Camp-Meinert. So to my left, you'll see Mr. Michael Watanabe, and we're proud that he's here with us today and accepted that role. Michael has 22 years of Office of Public School Construction experience, so you don't get any deeper than that bench than him. So I appreciate him being here. So at this time, we're asking the board to provide us the delegation authority so Michael can perform those functions delegated by the executive officer and also sign contracts and all things authorized by the State Allocation Board and file regulations on behalf of the State Allocation Board. So with that, I'm seeking your approval.
Thank you so much. Just a personal privilege, Mr. Watanabe. I have gotten to work with you over these past 5.5 years. You are a joy and a pleasure, everything from technology assistance to your deep knowledge of the program. And you approach everything with such humility and grace and professionalism. And I think we are certainly lucky to have you and grateful to Ms. Silverman for her leadership. And obviously devastated also that Ms. Camp-Meinert has moved on, but I just can't think of a better person. So thank you very, very much. Any other comments?
Congratulations, Mr. Watanabe. Very well deserved.
Great. Is that a motion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Thank you. Any public comment? Then may we take the roll, please?
Senator Wilk.
Aye.
Assemblymember Davies.
Aye.
Juan Morales.
Aye.
Jeremy Smith.
Aye.
Ana Lasso.
Aye.
Gail Miller.
Aye, that is approved. Yay! And we will keep that open for other members to share their love with Mr. Watanabe. Now we'll now move to the executive officer statement, please, Ms. Silverman.
Yes, we have a few items that we just want to provide the board these budget updates that impact the program with the California Preschool and Transitional Kindergarten Full Day Kindergarten Facility Grants Program. With the Senate Bill 114 signed by the governor July 10th, we just wanted to highlight there has been an extension granted for the encumbrance and expenditure of the funds awarded in 21-22, and that extension has been extended to June 30th of 2027, and those program funds that have been awarded for the 22-23 fiscal year, that has been extended to June 30th of 2028. Additionally, we also want to note that the $550 million, again, we're just highlighting that the funds have been mentioned that it would be provided to the program potentially in the 24-25 fiscal year, so that was the intent. The next item we wanted to share with the board is we have over $1.9 billion in general fund proceeds that will come to the State Allocation Board on behalf of processing new construction and modernization program grants for the 23-24 budget year. And so, again, we're looking forward to continue to process our program grants that are on existing workload. And other impacts as a result of the San Bernardino City lawsuit against the State Allocation Board, we also wanted to acknowledge that there is a statute change related to the K-12 audit guide. And what it shared before was collecting of the savings from the program as a result of charter school, career technical education program grants, and the financial hardship assistance. So we'll be working hand in hand with the Controller's Office in modifying the K-12 audit program as well. We have some great news next month. We'll be handing out $367 million for the second filing round for the California Preschool and Transitional Kindergarten and Full Day Kindergarten grant program. Again, just to remind the board, we received 446 applications for over $1.479 million. So great news, lots of awards to be granted next month, so we're looking forward to that. And then our next State Allocation Board meeting is September 27th at 3 o'clock.
Fantastic. Any questions for Ms. Silverman? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, we will now move on to our consent agenda, please.
So the consent agenda, I just wanted to highlight, there's one item that the consent agenda is ready for approval, but we just wanted to make an exception here. There is a construction cost index adjustment, or new construction eligibility adjustment. It's for Fountain Valley, and that's on stamp page 22. That has been withdrawn, and typically we do present them in September, so that will be going forward in September rather than this month. So that was one thing to note, and the consent agenda is ready for your approval to approve over $281.3 million of new construction and modernization projects and over $6.7 million for facility hardship projects.
Great, thank you very much. Any? Great, moved by Senator Wilk, seconded by Mr. Morales. Any public comment? Again, if you can raise your Zoom hand in the Zoom interface. We don't have any public comment on speaker cards. Anyone in the audience on the consent calendar? Seeing none, may we please, any objection to a unanimous roll call on this one too? Great, the consent calendar is approved. We will keep the roll open, noting that Assemblymember Maritsucci has joined us. After the financial reports, we'll go through we're going to see if we get a couple other members, Mr. Maritsucci, and then go ahead and reopen the roll on all the items. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you.
The financial reports, please, Ms. Silverman.
Financial reports, just want to highlight there's been lots of disbursements over the summer, so $89.9 million for June. That means proceeds going out to districts, and $160.6 million going out in July. And again, these are fund release requests by districts. And again, on the status of funds, we just wanted to highlight the board did approve those items in the consent agenda, and so hoorah, we got a lot of program grants awarded tonight, and we're excited about that.
Great, wonderful. Any questions on the financial reports? Any public comment? Again, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. Great. We will now move on to, are you okay, as Assemblymember Matsuuchi, if we move to our action item and then go back through all the action items when the other members arrive? Great, thank you, I appreciate that. So we will now, Mr. Watanabe, move to the application of the construction cost index changes to the projects previously on the unfunded list.
Thank you. We're on stamp page 194 of the agenda. This is our application of construction cost index, or CCI for short, changes to projects previously on the unfunded list. So in response to a litigation of the Coalition of Adequate School Housing versus State Allocation Board, we're requesting the board to do two things as a result of the writ of mandated remand from the Orange County Superior Court and the California Court of Appeals. They've asked us to do two things. One is reconsider the board's decision regarding the application of CCI adjustments to the apportionments for school districts on attachment A that were drawn on the funded list and later approved for apportionment in September of 2017. And secondly, specify the basis for the board's decision. So just as a little background, the board annually adjusts the CCI index each year for our per pupil grants based on the Class B construction cost index. We last did that in January of 2023 when the board increased the grants by 9.3%. And we do that every year in January, generally of each year. On occasions, the board has had to address the question of what to do with the unfunded list for those projects. So we have two unfunded lists we're talking about here. The first one on attachment A is the unfunded list. We call it also the true unfunded list, it's known as. These are projects that OPSC has fully processed. We've determined they are eligible for program funds at that time, but we lack the bond authority to fund them. So we present them to the board and they get placed on this unfunded list, and they're waiting for a future bond sale or program funds to allocate to the program. The second list we're talking about is the unfunded list lack of AB 55 loans. And these are projects that are also fully processed by OPSC, but in this case, we have bond authority for the projects. They're just waiting for cash for a bond sale to fund those. We call it lack of AB 55 loans because prior to 2008, when we had the fiscal crisis for the state, we used to provide direct apportionments to projects, but we didn't have cash in our bank accounts for those. So we borrowed money from the Pooled Money Investment Board as a loan, and then the treasurer would sell the bonds later to backfill that. So that's where that name comes from. So as I said, we've had a lot of discussions over the years. I want to take you back to 2010 when the board for the first ever CCI adjustment that was actually a decrease of a little over 6%. At that time, the CCI applied to anyone approved going forward for new unfunded approvals and placing them on the list, and they would wait for cash. In 2011, the CCI went up. The board took action at that time in 2011 to apply that CCI amount to all the projects waiting for cash on the unfunded list, lack of AB 55 loans at that time. Fast forward to 2012, we saw a lot of dwindling bond authority in the program. CCI index again went up. We presented the item to the board to discuss options for the application of those grants application of that index adjustment to projects on the unfunded list at that time. In parallel to this, there was a lot of board discussions going on. There was a subcommittee formed for new construction and taking a look at bond authority as it's dwindling down in the program. And how do we address that with no future bond currently on the horizon, as had been the case in the past? We presented options to the board at the January meeting, and to adjust all the projects on the unfunded list would have resulted in about a $44 million reduction in bond authority for projects waiting for funding. The board asked us to come back in February 2012 and provide a history of the adjustments. And what we showed back there is historically, when we've been lacking authority or cash for the program, the board has adjusted CCI, but we're in a different time frame in 2012. There was nothing on the horizon. In the past, the longest gap in time between a true unfunded list or an unfunded list lack of cash list funding forming was about 2 years. So at that time, with nothing on the horizon, the board chose not to adjust the projects on the unfunded list. They stayed on the list at those originally approved amounts. Going to January of 2013, CCI again went up. So again, one more time, we brought the options to the board and asked them, what would you like to do with the unfunded list at that time? At that time, we had two unfunded lists formed. We had both the true unfunded list that was already starting to fill up and the unfunded list lack of AB 55 loans. The board made a couple motions, neither of them passed, so the project stayed by default at their originally approved amounts, 2012, 2013 CCIs, on that unfunded list, where they remained that way all the way through 2017 until we approved the projects. So each month we published every month since 2013. Well, let me back up. In 2012, also happening in concern of the program and what the board wanted to do, that we The board made a conscious decision to rapidly get rid of that true unfunded list. There was emergency regulations approved, and we formed the application received beyond bond authority list. There was a desire among stakeholders to maintain a list to inform the legislature and the administration of the need for the program, but the board knew they wanted to change the program in some manner potentially. So as a middle ground, we formed this list. The applications are received by OPSC. We confirm they have all the documents needed to process the application, but we don't actually process it. It literally sits a corner in the office, and it sat there for 5 years until we got to 2017. So any projects received after October 31st of 2012 went to this new list. Moving forward to 2016, Proposition 51 passed. The board had a variety of discussions in early 2017 about how to get the money out the door as quickly as possible while addressing accountability components in the program. Over those discussions in June 2016, the board chose to move projects from the true unfunded list onto the unfunded list lack of AB 55 loan. They are prioritized to receive Prop 51 bond authority and then cash once it was eventually sold. What's important to note for those projects on the true funded list in the discussions in 2017 is they were not subject to the new rules for all projects processed after that point in time. They were not subject to grant agreements, which included limitations on the eligibility expenditures such as technology. New construction projects were not subject to the refresh of eligibility or reconfirmation of eligibility for the program for new construction. They are all exempt through based on a variety of feedback from stakeholders, and all those transcripts are included in attachment C in this item, and they were presented to the board back in 2018. In August, there was a bond sale. August 2017, there was a bond sale for the program. So at the September board meeting, we presented all those projects for priority funding apportionments. A board member did ask at that time what CCI year we're using, and we did point out it was that their originally approved amounts as they had been placed on the list in June of 2017. The board voted and approved apportionments for those projects. In response to the litigation, at the September 2018 meeting, we presented all the information and attachment C to the board to decide how they wanted to handle the litigation. And at that time, the board chose to move forward with the litigation. And that's where we are today, here 4 years later. The court found that the board had the authority to make the CCI adjustment or not to make the CCI adjustment, but where the board erred was we didn't specify the reasons. And while it may have been apparent to the members at that time, we did not present that item a list of reasons. We just presented the amounts as they've been published. So on page 199 for the board's consideration today, we kind of list these facts that I've laid out for you. The fact that the board has had extensive discussions over time on the options of providing CCI adjustments for projects on the two unfunded lists. The board has had this debate multiple times, and no actions were taken to adjust anyone after 2011. Projects have been presented in the board every month at their originally chosen amounts or originally approved amounts. It was apparent from the board's actions in 2012 to create the application to receive bond authority list that their desire to change the program and not continue as the current process was. And we also believe that the projects on the list had a choice in 2017, especially modernization projects. They could have withdrawn and resubmitted their applications and gotten the current CCI. They would have waited. They would have had to make that choice, though, between cash in hand versus waiting. New construction projects, we do acknowledge that if they had occupied their classrooms, they would not be eligible to reapply and do that, but that was a choice they made to stay on the true unfunded list at that time. We also point out that every single project approved in 2012 and 13 on the true unfunded list had a special condition at the bottom of every one of those funding shells that specified that the board's approval did not constitute a guarantee or commitment of future state funding and should not be relied on in any manner or any kind. And we caution to place any reliance on the placement of that list. So as such, we believe that everyone was clearly aware of what was going on there. We knew at the time in 2017 that a lot of these projects were reimbursement. What we've laid out on page 201 just from an additional consideration for the board is at the time the board made the decision in 2001, over 90% of the projects were already completed based on data we have from the Department of State Architect and their closeout data. Construction cost indexes are intended to cover the cost of construction at that time, though we do acknowledge that we do reimbursement projects at the current CCI versus the year they actually constructed. On page 202, we lay out for the board the impact of today's decision. If you had $100 back in 2012 and you increased it by the CCI annually up until 2017, it's roughly a 15.7% increase in the grants. We would, if the board chooses to make those adjustments today, we'd have to actually run the numbers for each project and process them based on those amounts, but we're estimating roughly a $55 million adjustment would be needed to provide 2017 CCI to these attachment A projects. And then lastly, on page 203, we've kind of laid out on what we have in attachment A is responses from 15 school districts and representatives and stakeholders to our preliminary report of this item and their responses. We've summarized them for you on page 203. A lot of it you'll see some similarities that we've kind of laid out there, and these have all been prior topics already discussed and considered by the board in the past. We've elected not to include any legal arguments here, as the court has already weighed in on the legal arguments and the board's authority to make these adjustments or not make these adjustments. So with that inclusion, we think the board correctly exercised its discretion in 2017 when it declined to apply the CCI adjustments. We believe it was fiscally prudent for the district at that time, given the extended gap in time of up to 5 years that projects have been sitting on that list. We don't believe retroactively applying the CCI adjustment would be appropriate, and it would prematurely exhaust funds that were already subscribed today by over $2 billion, even with the $2 billion in cash that Lisa mentioned earlier that was just provided to our program this year. With that, the board does need to take action one way or another and explain the reasons for it, whether that be the comments from staff or other considerations they would like to indicate. We have a response due to the courts that is due August 31st of 2023.
Great.
And I'll be open for questions.
Great. Thank you. So I'm just going to note, as Mr. Malloy will in the chat as well, that our Zoom interface, we will not be able to hear you in the room. So if you could please use the Q&A function in Zoom, we will read each question aloud or public comment. So please, again, if you're using Zoom, please use the Q&A function and not the raise hand function. Apologies for that. So with that, we're going to move to public comment. If you haven't already submitted a speaker part, please do that. We have, I think, how many do we have, Ms. Jones? We have 8 people, so I'm going to ask you not to repeat yourselves. We do have, our members do have a stop here at 5, so we're going to really do our best to get out of here. If in fact you keep going long, we'll begin to limit you. So we just ask that you're really conscious of your time and statements. So with that, in the order I received these, we're going to call on John Shook from the Savannah School District, please. And if you could line up in this order: Jim Havarti, also from Havana; Sue Johnson, also from Savannah; Ann Racing, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, from Cache; Stacy Abramovich from Valverde Unified School District; Jeremy Kogan from Santa Ana Unified School District; Martin Home from Tau Rossini, I think that's a law firm; and Glenn Gould from, was it Urbach, Huff, and Henderson, in that order. So thank you for being here. Please, Mr. Shook.
Well, thank you for having us here today. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is John Shook. I'm from Savannah School District. I'm currently Vice President of the Board of Education and representing all our board members. With this, from the State Allocation Board, our community is 84% economically disadvantaged. So as taxpayers, we pass bonds back to back, and we talk to our constituents and our voters that said that the state's going to help us out. We'll pass the bond, but the state is also going to help us out by reinstating some of the district money so that we can also build more and expansive buildings and facilities for our kids. And this is all before pre-K and TK. It's coming in. That's a whole other story. So listening to us and our board meetings and walking the streets and the supermarkets and stuff like that, and staying that the State Allocation Board's withholding these funds from us, and they're asking us why, and we said we've gone to court. It's just imperative to us that we collect these monies back, especially for us, not only the school district, but for our taxpayers that supported us in this whole bond program. They expect us that it's going to be made whole, that the state's going to, return the monies to us that are owed to us. And at this time, we really could not afford to do a COP. We're using general fund monies to help offset some of our facilities costs, and we're just maxed out on our bonding capacity. So we're just asking for your approval on this measure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. If we may have the next speaker, Jim Havarti from Savannah, also school district. Thank you.
So thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to address the honorable members here, the SAB present today.
Mind stating your name for the record?
Yes,
sir?
my name is Jim Harris, and I apologize for the writing. I was writing on my hand.
Oh my gosh, I apologize.
Sure. I represent the students and staff of the Savannah School District. Savannah serves children and students from the ages of 8 weeks old to 12 years of age. 8 weeks old, that's a new one for us this year. I'm here today to ask you all to please approve the increase in the construction cost index to the apportionments made on September 6, 2017. That CCI was expected and budgeted to be used based upon historical expectations of receiving a CCI at the time at which apportionments are dispersed. It's my understanding that the September 6, 2017 funding round is the only time that a CCI was not issued. Like Savannah, it's my understanding that most, if not all, school districts continue to develop budgets based upon expectations that the SAB will increase the per pupil grant award annually to offset the CCI or inflation. We're all understanding inflation these days, at or prior to dispersing apportionments. Had the CCI at that time been increased, as expected almost 6 years ago, those funds would have immediately been used to move forward with a plan to provide desperately needed restrooms, as promised to our Hanson students. It's one of our schools, one of our elementary schools. The cost of construction in that fiscal year. As you can imagine, the proximity and number of toilets can be a critical issue with very young children. And now we're serving very, very young children. When they have to go, they have to go. So restrooms are so important. Now, another 6 years has passed, and of course, cost of construction continues to rise, not to mention the increased costs related to the ever-changing building codes. So those also obviously kick up construction cost. One example, the restroom that I'm speaking of would have cost, and my numbers go back to 2020, $605,000. Today's cost is $720,000 for the same restroom. The CCI is so important to schools. It's something we really rely on to serve our students. Unfortunately, the SAB members in 2017 did not hear an appeal from Savannah School District or any other districts. The SAB chair at that time acted alone and rejected our appeal by means of a letter sent by that SAB chair at that time. This SAB chair is so much nicer. So I'm hopeful that the members of this body overturn the wrong decision made in 2017 by reversing that decision and providing the CCI adjustments to the districts that were negatively impacted. If so, children will benefit from that decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Dr. Sue Johnson, please, also from Savannah. Just noting, if you could just please keep the comments brief, would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Sue Johnson, Superintendent of Savannah School District. This is, lower it.
I just want to make sure folks on Zoom can hear. Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
This is my 34th year in the district, my 18th as superintendent. So I have a long history and a commitment to this school district and to the families we serve. And with 84% of our children economically disadvantaged, we feel that we have been treated differently from others. And maybe it's because we're a small district that doesn't have the funds to reach out and support our kids, or maybe because, you know, we're poor. I mean, the district is not a affluent district. We were unilaterally denied by the chair, and we weren't provided with that opportunity to appeal to the board. And to kind of rub salt into the wound, we ended up with Cyprus's denial, and they ended up with our denial at the time. So that was even more confusing for us. We feel that we've had unequal treatment, and the denial has impacted our children who are highest risk of just not having the same equity, the same parity, And that is not what we're looking for, because we want to treat all of our children equal. We want the parity. We truly appreciate Ms. Silverman's ability and her visit to our district back in 2018 to help us find other funding. We weren't able to locate other funding, but it didn't address the lack of CCI. Every year, we're forced to delay, as Mr. Harris said, the costs go up. So our community really deserves this. Our students at Reed School during the 2012 modernization year, that was 11 years ago. They're now in high school. The children in 2017 are going to promote to 7th grade next year. So that we've gone through a whole generation of children that where we haven't been able to provide that same equity. We hope that you're able to help us provide the equity to the next generation by doing the right thing for kids, by doing the right thing for our community, by doing the right thing to right this wrong. We could have removed our name from the list, but we didn't know it was going to happen. We had no notice of that meeting. And then you're rolling the dice that you're even going to get back on the list. So we really appreciate your time and your consideration of this matter. It's very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations on 34 years in service to the students of Savannah. Next, I don't want to do this wrong again. Mr. Alan Ressing? Sorry, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Again, my name is Alan Rising, and I'm the current chair for the Coalition for Adequate School Housing, better known as CASH. CASH membership represents over 80% of the students in our state. Today, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the concept of fairness and equity to the students and children that are served by these projects. And make no mistake, I use that very specifically. These projects serve students in our state. They make a meaningful benefit to the students and how they are able to perform in our schools. This board, since the inception of the school facilities program, has awarded thousands upon thousands of projects, over $50 billion worth of projects. But only these 129 projects are not being treated fairly and equitably in the program. It's important to remember that since the conception of the program in 1998 until 2012, every project awarded was benefited from construction cost increases at the time of that apportionment. Similarly, since 2017 and 18, again, every project benefited from the construction cost index at that time of that apportionment, but only these 129 projects did not benefit from that. Only these students that are represented by these 129 projects did not benefit from that fairness and equity. These school districts entered the program assuming that they were going to be treated fairly and equitably. They did nothing wrong. They followed the rules. They did not violate a rule or a procedure. They entered the program with the full expectation that they would be treated equitably. But only these 129 projects didn't get that funding. And make no mistake, the removal of that funding will impact children. Districts were forced to make decisions on things like reducing scope, pulling functionality out of these projects that could benefit children on a daily basis. They had to maybe cancel other projects, remove work from other schools that could have benefited from that money, or they had to take loans out that was paid off from general fund proceeds or other revenue streams that would have benefited the lives of children in their school districts. Districts were faced with really bad choices that they had to make in order to move these projects forward with the lack of those proceeds. But any way you look at it, children ended up losing in this mix by not getting these additional construction cost increases.
You want to wrap it up, sir, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So at this time, I want to basically compel you to take the opportunity to rectify an error, an abuse of discretion that happened back in 2012. It was a prior board that made that decision, but it's your opportunity today to make that right and to really think about the students of our state and how this monies can positively impact those school districts and how they serve their children. So again, I compel you to provide the construction cost increase to all 129 projects on this list to benefit the students of our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy Abramovich? Did I get that wrong too, from Valverde?
Good evening. It's Stacy Ambrosich. Close. It's a little difficult.
Please.
I'm here representing Valverde Unified School District. First, allow me to thank you to the State Allocation Board and OPSC for the many projects that we've been successful on. The issue that I'm here to speak about is, like my colleagues, is the apportionment that was made in 2017 using 2012 dollars. This took the district and many districts by surprise. Lack of communication between the State Allocation Board and districts, even with written appeal, came back with no comment. We were kind of left wondering what's going on. This has not happened and taken place in the past, nor has it in the future or since then. To further the issue, the OPSC stated the districts were about 92% complete with their projects by the time the apportionments were made. That's probably a true statement. However, we de-scoped our projects drastically. One of our biggest was the performing arts, and that did not. We have no place for music for our kids for music or any other of the arts programs to perform. When the district. Excuse me, I'm trying to read this. Working in good faith, the districts had the funding shortfall based on the State Allocation Board's change and their past practice. Many eligible items under the school facility programs also became ineligible, making it kind of a double hit to the districts. The only thing that we're asking is that the State Allocation Board reconsider and to fund at the 2017 eligibility, making the districts whole. We appreciate your consideration.
Thank you very much. Jeremy Kogan from Santa Ana Unified.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Jeremy Kogan. I am with Santa Ana Unified and live in Laguna Niguel. It's good to see you, Assemblymember Davies. Like my peers before me, I'm here to urge the State Allocation Board to reconsider providing these construction cost index updates to districts. And in Santa Ana Unified, our Mitchell Child Development Center was really forced to cut back on some really critical portions of the project. We could not build any of the shade structures, any of the playground equipment that had been part of the original concept of the project. That all had to be cut. And like my colleagues before me, were we to do that now, we'd obviously have a significantly greater cost to implement that. The shortfall affects a program serving special needs toddlers and preschoolers, 14 early childhood autism programs, as well as mild, moderate, severe, and medically fragile students. They all have insufficient playground equipment and inadequate protection from harsh sunlight or inclement weather. I'd like to say that we could have advocated for these students back in 2017, but there was no notice made to school districts like ours that we would get anything other than what had been our assumption of the normal update to the construction cost index. As a matter of fact, the agenda then stated only priority funding apportionments, a title that didn't provide sufficient information about the action to be taken. This is concerning given SAB's rules, but had it been properly agendized, we would have come before the SAB to advocate for our kids. I'd like to tell the families back in Santa Ana that we had the opportunity to appeal back then, but the SAB refused to hear the district's appeal of its apportionment decision, and it was returned to the district without any action being taken. That left us no choice but to join many of our peers in the action taken. So quite simply, as my peers and my colleagues have stated, I'm going to add to the chorus and say that we really do hope that this is very carefully looked at and reconsidered. This means a lot to these special needs kids. It means a lot to every kid in every district that has been impacted by this, everyone on the list. And whether or not the outcome changes today, I sincerely hope this is taken into consideration with policymaking going forward. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. Martin Hom, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Martin Hom. I'm an attorney, boo, with Tal Rossini. Thank you so much for having us. It's nice to see everybody in person instead of watching it on the computer. But and I had the pleasure of representing Cache, Bakersfield, Central Unified, Cypress, and Savannah in the litigation. And one thing that came up during the litigation that we spent a lot of time on is one of your regulations. It's 1859.107. Your attorneys took the position, said, hey, if you're on this unfunded list, this says you may, capital words may, get an adjustment in the future. So what disappointed me with the court was this regulation was passed in 1999. God, that was a long time ago. But when this board passed that regulation, it went through all the categories and it said, hey, if you've already been approved and received your apportionment, which is not the case here, you do not get any changes in the program and you do not get a CCI adjustment. You got your money, so you're good. If you've submitted your application, but OPSC has not processed it, that would be the applications beyond, right? So they've got it, they've looked at it, but it's not been processed. You get changes in the program and you get CCI adjustment. Here's the important one. If you're on an unfunded list like we had here, you do not get changes in the program. However, you do get the CCI index adjustment, exactly this case. The board passed this, I think you called it a guideline for processing. And it was so important that OPSC sent out a mass mailer in November of 1999 to every school district setting forth.
Right, sir, that these arguments were made in court and addressed by the court. So everyone else has had about 2.5 minutes. So I don't want to relitigate what happened in court. So.
I just want to make sure that these members are aware of that. Because I know none of you, maybe Juan was on the board, and I just want to make sure that you're aware of that.
So we don't need to restate arguments. We can summarize them differently. Thank you. But no, please finish, but finish without describing the entire oral argument to the court.
That was, I just wanted to just address that, and I haven't addressed the others. It was just that one point with the regulation. It was disappointing to me that the court didn't really even address that. And
they did hear it.
They did hear it. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn Gould, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Gould. I am with the law firm Orbach, Huff, and Henderson. We were attorneys of record for both the Val Verde Unified School District and the Santa Ana Unified School District in the writ proceeding. I'm not going to revisit the legal arguments, but I do want to make a couple of what I think are important points. There's an overarching theme throughout this process, which is a lack of communication between this board, OPSC, and the member districts who were impacted by these apportionments. We've heard about the agendizing of the item and how that was inadequate, which is why nobody showed to contest these apportionments, but also on the back end, meaning at the point in time when the SAB finally took up the apportionments in 2017, we've heard that from Mr. Watanabe that 92% of the projects had been completed. That's frankly not a completely accurate statement. Many of those projects had to be de-scoped because the money wasn't there. And I don't know of any attempt made by OPSC to talk to these impacted districts and figure out whether that statement was even accurate, to make any determination as to what the adverse impacts were to these districts. And in light of that, the action that was taken, that's very disappointing. And I would suggest to you, as what is essentially a new board from 2017 in your composition, that moving forward, the problem needs to be addressed, or problems, the problem of communication. When you're taking an action that is anomalous with the actions you've taken before, and making sure that everybody understands what you're doing so they have an opportunity to be heard. This is the first opportunity they've had to be heard. The other thing I would say is that I would hope that moving forward, there will come some point in time where the regulations get changed, revised, so that we can make sure that districts in the future receive a full apportionment that they're due. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment in person? Seeing none, I'm going to read a comment from Ann Silvas from Cypress School District. And if you could please, if anyone else has anything, please put it in the Q&A. And I'm reading it directly, and again, I apologize, you don't have the opportunity to present on Zoom. Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Ann Silvis, and I'm the superintendent of Cypress School District, which serves 3,400 students in transitional kindergarten through 6th grade in Orange County. I want to start by expressing my appreciation that this matter is finally being discussed in a public meeting because it affords affected school districts the opportunity to address the board on the impact of your decision today. When we attempted an appeal to the State Allocation Board in 2017, we were summarily dismissed in a rejection letter from then Board Chair Irena Ortega. Nearly 6 years later, we finally get our chance. However, I'm extremely disappointed that my comments cannot be heard directly by the board, but rather must be read and consequently interpreted by another reader. I understand when resources are limited, tough decisions must be made. But how do you make informed decisions without sufficient information or consideration of the impact they will have on those affected? The assumptions made by the Office of Public School Construction in their recommendation to you are both superficial and flawed. To my knowledge, no one ever reached out to school districts on the 2012-13 unfunded list to find out what did or didn't happen with school modernization projects as a result of significant delays in funding. At least no one reached out to me. So I would like to share with you what happened in Cypress. Steve Luther Elementary School was nearly 50 years old and in desperate need of modernization. Our students and staff deserve better. The project simply couldn't wait, so we had to stretch and secure bridge financing. We issued certificates of participation in anticipation of state funding. That's how important this modernization project was to the district. While the project may be complete today, we're still paying the bill. So this notion that we don't need the additional CCI adjustment is quite honestly offensive. How does OPSC know what we need? They don't because they never asked, but now you know. Ours is just one story, one of 129. Additionally, the statement made this afternoon that we had a, quote, choice is false. It was a false choice. The bottom line is this. If you do not apply the CCI adjustment as applied in the 2 subsequent funding rounds after ours, you will be unfairly penalizing the students of the Cypress School District as well as the students in 128 other California school districts. The board is not bound by the decisions of the past. Therefore, I urge you to make the right decision today, the fair decision, and apply the CCI adjustment. Thank you. And again, I sincerely apologize, Superintendent Silvas, that you were not able to answer that in person. Anyone else in the audience that wants to comment? I'm going to just make one more plea for public comment online. You can put it in the chat. You can put it in the Q&A. We'll just give you about 10 seconds if you'd like to make a comment and wait for you to type in your answer. Great. Well, seeing none, I do want to address some of the comments and then I'll open it up to the board for comments. I think that what we heard from the attorneys, and I think it's an important one, is that many of the arguments you heard today were addressed by the court. And this board is always making decisions based on the construction cost index changes and the time value of money. And that's really what we're talking about here today. 90% of these projects are complete. And this idea that in the past the board has acted consistently with the year of construction and application is a really important one, because the only way to fairly fund the rest of the state is that we are consistently dealing with the year in which construction occurred. A regulation change, like we heard from one of the attorneys, I understand is something the board can consider. But the idea that we would make this adjustment when what the court has asked us to do is simply make the decision that, yes, these school districts are getting this funding. We are not talking about the year in which we're reimbursing the schools for, especially because while we all pay off construction, I'm still paying off my house too, even though it was built a long, long time ago. The bank is not going to now tell me, you know what? You're going to get a little inflation adjustment, and now I'm going to give you a little bit more money and now you get to pay a different amount. Unfortunately, that's not how construction works. So while this was a decision that boards made, The board continues to make this decision over and over again in 2012, 13, and again in 17. So I will also just note that the idea that the board does agree on a CCI every single year because the cost of construction changes and fluctuates. So it's a really, really important point. The idea that it's not noticed with every single project is precisely because it's the year in which construction occurs. So with that, would love to open it up to, would love to welcome Senator Senator Newman. My God, I'm so sorry. And you don't actually look anything alike. And yeah, and
today in committee he was called Governor. Newman, I like.
Oh well, there you go. Well, yeah. Well, at least you were promoted earlier. I don't know, but with that, open it up to any other board members for questions or comments. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to just, if it's appropriate, now make a motion.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Great. Thank you, Assemblymember Davies. We have a motion and a second. And with that, any other questions from the board? Seeing none, are you looking at me, Mr. Ephraim? No. Okay. Okay. I thought I was getting a look from our attorney. And we like attorneys here, for the record. We have an amazing one. So with that, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to confirm that there's no other public comment from the audience. No other public comment online. Great. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Actually, Madam Chair, I just
Yeah,
want to
please.
clarify. So the motion is
Thank
to
you.
adopt the supplemental report.
Your microphone has to be on.
So just to clarify, the motion is to adopt the supplemental report as this decision in the matter.
Thank you, some member. I was going to say that, but essentially that's it. I make a motion to approve the staff recommendation in the report.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Seeing none, may we please call the roll?
Certainly. Senator Wilk. Senator Newman. Assemblymember Murasucci.
No.
Assemblymember Davies. Juan Morales. Jeremy Smith. Lana Lasso.
Aye.
Bill Miller.
Aye, the staff report is adopted. Next, for the 90-day workload, Ms. Silverman, anything to report?
90-day workload and appeals log is open for your approval.
Great, thank you very much. We have no further business to come before the board. We are going to go back through and make sure that we, for the members that weren't here, that we open it up for your votes. Our first order of business was the minutes. If we can call the roll for our absent members, please.
Okay. Senator Newman. Aye. Senator Murasucci. Assemblymember Murasucci. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. Next, we had the delegation of authority to Mr. Watanabe as Deputy Executive Officer.
Senator Newman. Aye. Assemblymember Murasucci. Aye. Thank you.
The delegation of authority is approved. Next, we had the consent agenda.
Senator Newman. Aye. Thank you. Assemblymember Murasucci. Aye. Thank you very much.
Great. And that now, Ms. Jones, does that conclude our meeting?
And that does take care of all the votes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. We are adjourned at 5 p.m. Thank you.